Today we're going to be talking about a project that was completed as part of the Infant Brain Imaging Study Network called Sleep in Infants with Down Syndrome or Familial Likelihood of Autism. And it focuses on parent concerns and sleep characteristics in the first year of life. My name's Annette Estes. I'm at the University of Washington in Seattle, and I've been part of the IBIS network since it was started over 20 years ago, and I'm really excited to share this information. First, I want to acknowledge that our funding sources came from the National Institutes of Health and that I have no conflicts of interest. As I said, this is a project that was made possible by the Infant Brain Imaging Study Network, and IBIS is a consortium of researchers and universities across the United States and Canada, and you can get more information about it at the website below. And I really want to emphasize how much work and collaboration went into making this data set possible. So why study infant sleep? Infancy is a period of rapid change in sleep. It also involves rapid change in brain development and behavior. So it's a very interesting time to look at the relationships between these things. Sleep supports cognitive development, language, motor, and emotional development. So we think that there's an interaction between sleep and all these different developmental changes that are happening in this infancy period. One of the things we have found out over the last several decades really is that sleep problems are common in neurodevelopmental disabilities. So they're present, they're important, but their early timing isn't well understood. So one way we can find out more about early sleep problems is parent observations that might provide an important first signal of emerging sleep difficulties. Our central question that we asked in this study was, when do sleep differences and parent concerns emerge? And do these concerns differ by neurodevelopmental groups? So the IBIS sleep study was part of figuring this out. The full report is available on line. Coco is the first author. You can see that citation here and access it if you want more details. So the study design for this project involved two different multi-site longitudinal groups or studies, and we combined these two studies for comparison of sleep problems. First, in the Down syndrome group, we had 59 infants with Down syndrome at 6 months and 58 at 12 months of age. And in the high likelihood group that had an older autistic sibling, we had 173 participants at 6 months and 129 at 12 months. And then we had a group of lower familial likelihood infants with no family history of autism. And there were 54 of these infants at 6 months and 30 at 12 months. So in total, 156 infants completed assessments at both 6 and 12 months. Sleep was assessed using parent report at 6 and 12 months of age using the brief infant sleep questionnaire. This questionnaire gets parents to tell us about their concerns, either no sleep problems, maybe a small sleep problem, or very serious problems. And they also talk about sleep characteristics of their infants at these ages. So how long are their babies sleeping at night, or night sleep duration, day sleep duration, so that has to do with naps, and nighttime wakefulness, and then sleep onset latency, which is called the time needed to fall asleep. And our data analyses compared groups cross-sectionally, so at one period of time, and also looked at changes from 6 to 12 months using mixed effects models. So mainly what we found, to distill it, is sleep differences began at 6 months of age, but were more clear, more apparent by 12 months. So just looking within the 6-month time point, Down syndrome parents reported fewer sleep concerns than high likelihood and low likelihood parents. High likelihood infants took longer to fall asleep than low likelihood infants. That's that sleep onset latency variable. And Down syndrome infants had less nighttime wakefulness than the low likelihood infants. At 12 months, Down syndrome and high likelihood infants had less nighttime sleep than low likelihood infants. Also, the Down syndrome and high likelihood infants had more nighttime wakefulness than low likelihood infants. The high likelihood infants continued to show longer sleep onset latency than the other two groups. So overall, the developmental pattern was that low likelihood infants generally started sleeping more at night between 6 and 12 months, and they reduced how much time they were awake at night. And this pattern was less consistent in the Down syndrome and high likelihood groups. So what does this mean? I think the first important thing is to notice sleep differences are present during the first year of life, with distinct timing and different patterns of types of sleep challenges in the Down syndrome versus the high likelihood infants. The other thing to note is that parent concerns don't always match the sleep characteristics that we know exist. So for example, Down syndrome parents reported fewer concerns at 6 months, despite the fact that there's known risk for sleep problems in Down syndrome infants. So what is the interpretation and implications of these findings? Sleep differences are present during the first year of life, with different timing and distinct patterns of sleep problems in the Down syndrome and high likelihood infants. Also, parent concerns don't always match up with what we know about sleep characteristics. So for example, Down syndrome parents reported fewer concerns at 6 months. And this was a surprise to us because we know that infants with Down syndrome have a higher rate of obstructive sleep apnea or sleep disordered breathing. And we really have to think a little bit about why Down syndrome parents might not be concerned at that age. In the paper, what we talk about in more detail is the fact that at 6 months of age, parents of Down syndrome infants are often prioritizing more life-threatening or really important health problems like heart issues or other medical problems that need to be taken care of. Also, maybe Down syndrome babies aren't waking their parents up as much at night, so they aren't aware as they might be of this sleep disordered breathing pattern. So early sleep assessment and parent education might support earlier identification of sleep problems and then facilitate intervention. Longer sleep onset latency in high likelihood infants is very interesting finding. Also, it could reflect a family sort of genetic liability. It could also have to do with household influences or both. But what we do know is this finding of longer time to fall asleep has been replicated across a number of samples now. So some of the limitations of this study are that this is only parent report, so it doesn't involve objective observations or measurement of sleep. And there's not as much demographic diversity in this group. Even though we have babies from across the country, there are fewer families with lower socioeconomic status or maybe living in challenging situations, and that would be an important group of families to also include to understand this better. So next steps in this study are to link these findings with later developmental outcomes. So you might have noticed that we talked about the high likelihood infants, but we don't actually know who ended up developing autism among those kids. So that could really shed some light on whether these findings hold up over time and what they mean for later development. And the same with infants with Down syndrome. What are their developmental outcomes, and are those at all related to sleep problems early on? So the take-home message here is that tracking sleep longitudinally rather than at just one time point could reveal early pathways to better developmental outcomes. Okay, if you made it through the talk, I want to thank you for your attention and time and let you know that we would welcome any kind of questions that you might have. And you can contact us through the IBIS website. Thank you.